Vanguard of the CELAC, the United Summit of Head of States in Honduras. Many political figures have arrived to the country in this meeting. On Thursday, let's recall, under the motto United for the Greater Homeland, foreign ministers are meeting at the headquarters of the Central Bank of Honduras just hours before the 9th Presidential Summit of the Community of Latin American Caribbean States. They will discuss economic and social solutions of regional interests in order to establish the thematic agenda with the strategic guidelines that select leaders will analyze on Wednesday. Throughout the day, the delegation from the 33 select member countries who will receive a dossier summarizing the work carried out by the Central American country during its years at the helm of the organization. A period that includes 16 such meetings. They will also review the Tegucigalpa Declaration, a key document for the regional consensus in Latin America and the Caribbean, which contains the action and agreements reached during a working group meeting of the 2024-2025 period. In the morning, the Honduran Vice Minister of Consular and Migration Affairs, Antonio Garcia, received the Foreign Minister Arnoldo Tinoco from Costa Rica, also Celinda Luna from Bolivia, and now is arriving the President of the country, Luis Arce, and Juan Ramon de la Fuente from Mexico. The Vice Minister of International Cooperation, Cindy Rodriguez, welcomed Colombian Foreign Affairs Minister Laura Travia, as well as the Vice President of Ecuador, Peru, Venezuela, and Chile. Honduras authorities also reported the arrival of Panama's Vice Minister of Multilateral Affairs, Carlos Guevara, and the foreign ministers from Jamaica, Antigua and Barbuda, St. Kitts and Nevis, Grenada, Bruno Rodriguez from Cuba, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Trinidad and Tobago. Let's recall that earlier, Honduran Defense Minister Rick Moncada welcomed Honduran's President Yamandu Orsi at the Palmorela Air Base north of the Tegucigalpa. Also present in Honduran territory is the leaders of Haiti's Transnational Presidential Council, Les Livoltaire. Meanwhile, Venezuelan Foreign Minister Ivan Gil arrived in Honduras on Monday with the intention of reaffirming the need for Latin American unity to confront challenging times. His context of strengthening regional relations under Honduran's leadership, specifically in light of U.S. policies on migration and global trade, the presence of these delegations reaffirms the growing interest in bolstering both bilateral and multilateral ties among the select members. Through the day, the presidents of Brazil, just as we are watching, Bolivia, Cuba, Guatemala, Mexico, and Colombia are expected to arrive in Honduras, and just now the president of Bolivia, Luis Arce Catacora, arrived to Honduras in the framework of the summit. For his part, the president of Brazil, Luis Ignacio Lula da Silva, affirmed his government's willingness to boost trade and the regional financial system.
We need to promote regional trade in goods and services, its diversification and increasing facilitation. In order to expand our trade, my government is committed to reactivating the agreement on reciprocal payments and credits of the Latin American Integration Association and expand the system of payments in local currency. Integrate transportation, energy, and telecommunications networks over short distances, reduce costs, and encourage synergies between productive chains. Brazil has been promoting 5 South American integration routes that will link the Caribbean, Atlantic, and Pacific. Strengthening regional financial institutions such as the Development Bank of Latin America and the Caribbean Development Bank and FAMPLATA is essential to ensure that these projects come to fruition.
President Xiomara Castro stressed the need for the countries of the region to build a future together in the face of new global realities.
Presidents, we cannot continue to walk apart when the world is reorganizing itself without us. but neither can we unite by repeating the recipes of failure, the neoliberal model, promoted by the Washington Consensus in the 90s, predatory and exclusive, has emptied our economies, indebted our countries, concentrated capital in a few hands and privatized public services. Concentrating through its form nature, which should not continue to be the spoils of capital.
The Honduran head of state denounced that in the midst of the massive deportation of migrants by the U.S., laws must be respected.
Our young people have become migrants who, seeking the American dream, today are massively expelled from the United States. In the face of this challenge, CELAC must be respected as a zone of peace. This commitment against war and in favor of peace has to be ratified, this day, in this assembly.
Honduras has the head of state and government of the 9th Summit of the Community of Latin American Caribbean States to address economic and social solutions in the face of the crisis caused by capitalism. With the presence of the President of Brazil, Mexico, Colombia, Uruguay, Cuba, and Honduras, the meeting takes place in the midst of the tariff war declared by the President of the U.S., Donald Trump. In addition, the presidents will build an agenda to face global challenges such as the trade war. Likewise, during the day, the President of Honduras, Xiomara Castro, is expected to hand over the pro tempore presidency of the bloc to her Colombian counterpart, Gustavo Petro. The President of Bolivia, Luis Arce, emphasized during the 9th CELAC summit the importance of consolidating the organization as a platform for political cooperation in order to find its own solutions to the challenges that the region faces.
In a world characterized by geopolitical transitions, economic inequalities, and threats to democratic stability, CELAC must consolidate itself as a platform for political cooperation where our voices are heard, without external interference, and where we can provide our own solutions to the challenges we face. It is important that as a region we reaffirm the indispensable role of multilateralism, effective and not testimonial, in the importance of strengthening our participation in these international forums to promote cooperation, solidarity, and sustainable development.
Likewise, during his speech, Cuban President Miguel Díaz-Canel urged the member countries to work together for the well-being, peace and security of the peoples of Latin America and the Caribbean.
At a time when the world is experiencing an escalation of tensions, of an increase in armed conflicts and of unconventional wars, as well as of a deepening of inequalities, social exclusion and poverty, it is crucial to join efforts and work together for the well-being, peace and security of the Latin American and Caribbean peoples. It is urgent to expand cooperation, to identify projects beneficial to our nations and to take advantage of the complementarities of the economies of the region. To achieve that, it is essential to agree on our positions, to defend the historical consensus of the community and to identify shared visions in other issues of interest for our nations. To speak as one voice in international forums will always be an important contribution to the struggle of developing countries for the implementation of an international, democratic, fair, equitable and respectful order and the sovereign equality of all states.
Colombian President Gustavo Petro said at the SELAC summit in Honduras that no American government should accept that its citizens be treated as criminals and sent to prisons in El Salvador.
It's not whether those jails should be there or not. What I do criticize is that no migrant should go to any of those jails, because they would be treated as criminals and as slaves, and they are not. They are human beings, and Latin America cannot lower the flag of human dignity. Human dignity was what made us be born as republics and not as monarchies. If we forget that part of history, which is the same of that of the United States except for Canada, we then forget what the very concept of human dignity means.
During her speech at the ninth SELAC summit, Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum stressed that Latin America and the Caribbean must work together to strengthen national integration.
Today, 15 years after the first meeting of this community, we find ourselves in a very different international situation. These are times of radical changes in world trade that affect our countries. Each of us, with legitimacy, seeks the best for our peoples and nations. However, I believe that today, more than ever, is a good time to recognize that Latin America and the Caribbean require unity and solidarity from their governments and their peoples, in order to strengthen a greater regional integration, always within the framework of mutual respect and compliance with the sovereignty and independence of our countries and the trade agreements that each of us may have.
Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro said at the SELAC summit that only with the union of the member countries of the bloc will it be possible to face the coercive measures implemented by the U.S. in the region.
The union of our peoples is a must, and need to be built on the basis of the heritage that we have been able to create and accumulate, of proposals. The CELAC must take up again, with force, the Council of Ministers meetings, as Honduras did during its extraordinary presidency. I congratulate President Xiomara Castro and Honduras for the virtuous leadership she has shown to reactivate the joint councils of ministers in the fields of economy, health, education, science and technology, but councils of ministers that contribute with experiences and ideas for shared action.
In our sovereignty, art of determination, and a profound love for a dream of a future in freedom, with prosperity, one and work by our people in the union of our region. The union of our people is our obligation, and it must be built in the base of the patrimony of we has reached and upwarded. SELAC has to retake strongly the realization of the ministers. I congratulate the Honduras President Xiomara Castro for this virtual goal that she has made the economic world, the tariff war against 180 countries around the world has bring what is qualified as the end of the globalization, the West globalization. The right of commerce, economic and international public, is hurt with the agreements unilateral and multilateral in commerce. It is buried under the missiles of the tariff war, the World Trade Organization. It is imposed again an hegemonic model and economic and commercial. And it is necessary to put an end of
Ni fiemos nuestra
differences,
suerte,
not wait
sino a
anything
nuestras
from
propias
Spain,
fuerzas. Un
but
solo
build
pensamiento,
our
una sola
lucky of
doctrina,
our own.
verdaderamente libertaria e independentista, para construir un destino
Libertarism
común.
and
Unámonos.
independent
Es posible la
opinions,
unión
independent
en
thoughts.
la diversidad.
The
Unámonos
diversity, we
para
must
poder
be united
despuntar
to
este siglo con
can win
autodeterminación,
in this era
con
with
soberanía, con
autodetermination,
libertad
sovereignty,
verdadera y con una
freedom,
base económica y social y
and
moral
with,
poderosa
of
que sea el
course,
preludio de una nueva época.
in Venezuela, the families of the more than 200 migrants kidnapped in El Salvador once again demand the immediate release of their loved ones. The families of the victims gathered in front of the United Nations headquarters in Caracas to ask the international organization to mediate with the government of Nayib Bukele for their repatriation. In a shout of freedom for their relatives and carrying banners with their photographs, those present who came from all parts of the country handed over a letter in which they demand that the UN leads the way for justice to be done and for them to be returned. The more than 250 Venezuelans who were arbitrarily transferred to El Salvador have been held in a maximum security prison for 24 days without having committed any crime nor having been gathered right to defense. Just arrived to Honduras in the framework of the CELAC, the United Summit of Head of States in Honduras. Many political figures have arrived to the country in this meeting. On Thursday, let's recall, under the motto United